The insomnia hit me again at 2:30 in the morning, same as it had every night this week. Wedding stress, Mira called it, though she slept like a baby through my tossing and turning. 24 years of marriage, and she still managed to look peaceful while I stared at the ceiling, running through tomorrow's rehearsal dinner checklist for the 100th time. Grant Solen, insurance investigator turned wedding planner. If my old colleagues at the paper could see me now, obsessing over table arrangements and flower deliveries. But that's what you do for your daughter's wedding, right? Even when the groom makes your skin crawl. Cole Merrick, 25 years old, all charm and white teeth, with a kind of confidence that comes from never having to work for anything. Nora deserved better, but try telling that to a 22-year-old woman in love. I'd learned to keep my mouth shut about Cole, mostly because every criticism I voiced seemed to push Nora further into his arms. I rolled out of bed, careful not to wake Mira, and padded downstairs in my boxers and t-shirt. The house felt different at night, bigger somehow, full of shadows that didn't exist during the day. Our Victorian had been in my family for 3 generations, and sometimes I swore I could feel all that history pressing down on me. The kitchen was bathed in moonlight streaming through the bay window. I grabbed a glass of water and stood there, looking out at our back garden. That's when I noticed the light in the shed, just a thin sliver of yellow spilling out from under the door, barely visible through the oak trees. Probably left it on after hauling out the extra chairs for tomorrow's dinner. Mira would have my head if I ran up the electric bill over something so stupid. I slipped on my garden boots and stepped outside. The October air bit through my thin shirt, and I could see my breath in small puffs. Maine in autumn, beautiful during the day, unforgiving at night. The grass was wet with dew, soaking through my socks where they met the boots. As I got closer to the shed, I heard voices. Low, urgent whispers that made me stop in my tracks. My investigator instincts kicked in. 20 years of tracking insurance fraud teaches you to move quietly and observe first, ask questions later. The shed door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see 2 figures pressed against my workbench. Mira's blonde hair caught the light first, unmistakable even in the dim glow of the overhead bulb. She was facing away from me, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. The man behind her wasn't me. Cole Merrick had his hands on my wife's waist, his face buried in her neck. Her head was thrown back, eyes closed, making soft sounds I hadn't heard from her in years. They moved together with the practiced rhythm of people who'd done this before, many times before. My first instinct was to burst through that door and tear Cole's pretty face off. My hands clenched into fists, and I took a step forward. Then I heard footsteps behind me on the gravel path. Dad, don't. Nora's voice was barely above a whisper, but it stopped me cold. I turned to find my daughter standing there in her pajamas and a heavy coat, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger than her 22 years, but her eyes held something ancient and tired. Nora, I already knew, she said, cutting me off. Her voice was steady, controlled. I've known for months. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked back at the shed, where Mira and Cole were still lost in their moment, oblivious to our presence. When I turned back to Nora, she was holding something in her hand, a flash drive. There's more, Dad. So much more. She pressed the drive into my palm, her fingers cold against mine. You need to see everything. It's all on here. I stared at the small device, my mind racing. How long have you? Come inside, she said. We need to talk. I followed her back to the house, leaving Mira and Cole to their betrayal. In the kitchen, Nora put the kettle on like this was any normal night, like we were about to have tea and discuss the weather. Sit down, Dad. I sat at our kitchen table, the same one where we'd eaten breakfast every morning for 15 years, where I'd helped Nora with her homework, where Mira and I had planned family vacations and discussed mortgage refinancing and argued about whose turn it was to take out the garbage. Normal things, married things. How long? I asked again. Nora poured hot water over 2 tea bags, her movements precise and careful. I first suspected something 6 months ago. Cole would get texts during dinner, always from work. But his expression when he read them, she shook her head. I know that look. I've seen it on his face when he looks at me. She set a mug in front of me, the steam rising between us like a barrier. I followed him one night, saw him go into the Marriott downtown. I waited in the parking lot for 3 hours, and when he came out, Mom was with him. The tea tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing. I confronted him the next day, Nora continued. He tried to deny it, then he tried to blame me, said I was too young, too naive, that I didn't understand what he needed, that Mom understood him in ways I never could. And you didn't tell me. I couldn't, not yet, because that's when I started digging deeper, and I found She gestured to the flash drive still clutched in my hand. Everything. I looked down at the device. Such a small thing to hold the destruction of a marriage. What's on here, Nora? Emails going back 5 years. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text messages. She took a sip of her tea, her hand steady despite everything. And other things. Things about our family that you need to know. The kitchen felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. 24 years of marriage, and I'd been blind to all of it. How many signs had I missed? How many late nights at the office, weekend conferences, girls' trips with her sister Vera? There's something else, Nora said, and her voice finally cracked. About me, about who I am. What do you mean? She reached across the table and took my free hand. Her fingers were trembling now. I'm not your daughter, Dad. Not biologically. The words hung in the air between us. I heard them, processed them, but they didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. That's impossible. I was there when you were born. I held you. The fertility treatments Mom had. The donor program. Nora's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed strong. It wasn't anonymous. It wasn't random. She knew exactly who the father was. I felt like I was drowning, like the kitchen floor had opened up and I was falling through 22 years of memories, watching them all crumble and reform into something unrecognizable. Who? I managed to ask. Holden Ravell. He ran a contracting business downtown until he passed away 8 months ago. Mom's been having an affair with him for 24 years, Dad, since before I was born. Holden Ravell? The name was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Just another face in our small Maine town, another business owner I might have nodded to at the hardware store or the post office. How do you know all this? Because his widow contacted me 3 weeks ago, Leora Ravell. She found letters in Holden's things after he passed. Love letters from Mom, and other documents. Nora stood up and walked to the window, looking out toward the shed. The light was still on. Mom promised him she'd leave you after my wedding, that they could finally be together openly now that Holden's business was struggling and he needed her support. I laughed, actually laughed, though nothing about this was funny. Her support? With what money? Nora turned back to me, and I saw pity in her eyes. Pity for her old man, the fool who'd been played for over 2 decades. Your money, Dad. She's been siphoning funds from your accounts for years. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The flash drive has all the bank records. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The crash echoed through the quiet kitchen, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about our savings account, the one that never seemed to grow despite my steady income, the investment portfolio that always underperformed, the mysterious expenses Mira could never quite explain. How much? Over $300,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $300,000. My father's inheritance. The money I'd saved for Nora's college, for our retirement, for the life I thought we were building together. Gone. Funneled to my wife's lover to prop up his failing business. There's more on the drive, Nora said quietly. Financial records, emails between Mom and Aunt Vera, medical documents from when I was born. Vera helped cover it all up. She provided alibis, forged paperwork, even coached me never to ask questions about why I looked nothing like you. Vera, Mira's older sister, the cold fish who'd never liked me. Always made snide comments about my job, my house, my family background. Now it all made sense. She hadn't been protecting her sister's marriage. She'd been protecting her sister's deception. I picked up the flash drive, this tiny repository of betrayal. Why now? Why tell me all this tonight? Because tomorrow is my wedding day, and I can't go through with it. Not knowing what I know, not watching you smile and give toasts and pretend everything is perfect when it's all built on lies. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you. I kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some explanation that would make it all okay. But there isn't. I walked around the table and pulled her into a hug. She felt small in my arms, fragile, like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. You have nothing to apologize for, I said into her hair. Nothing at all. We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while my marriage dissolved around us. Outside, the shed light finally went off. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I sat in my home office with my laptop, methodically going through every file on Nora's flash drive. 20 years of investigating insurance fraud had taught me how to read financial records, how to spot patterns and inconsistencies, but nothing had prepared me for this. The earliest emails dated back to 1999, just 2 years into my marriage with Mira. Casual messages at first, the kind you might send to any friend. But by 2001, the tone had shifted. Pet names appeared, references to stolen moments and secret meetings. By the time Nora was born in 2002, Mira and Holden were already planning a future together. Grant suspects nothing, she'd written in 2003. He's so focused on work, on providing for us. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how alive you make me feel, how much I need you. I made coffee and kept reading. The financial records painted an even clearer picture. Small withdrawals at first, $50 here, $100 there. Money taken from our joint account and deposited into a separate account I'd never known existed. Over the years, the amounts grew larger and more frequent. In 2010, she'd transferred $15,000 in a single transaction. The memo line read, "Home renovation loan." I remembered that year. We'd talked about updating the kitchen, but ultimately decided we couldn't afford it. Apparently we could afford it. We just couldn't afford to spend the money on ourselves. The medical records were the hardest to read. Fertility clinic appointments I'd attended with her, holding her hand while doctors explained our options. The anonymous donor program that would give us the child we both wanted so desperately. Except it hadn't been anonymous at all. Holden Ravell had been there for every appointment, listed as a consulting specialist on the paperwork. Vera had been there too, as Mira's medical advocate. They'd all sat in those sterile rooms, planning Nora's conception while I worried about insurance coverage and success rates. I'd been so grateful when Nora was born, so amazed by this perfect little person who was supposedly half me. I'd stared at her for hours in the hospital, looking for traces of myself in her features. When I couldn't find them, I'd assumed she'd inherited Mira's genes. Now I knew the truth. She'd inherited a stranger's. By 6 a.m, I'd read everything. Every email, every bank statement, every forged document. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't just an affair, it was an elaborate con game that had lasted over 2 decades. Mira had played the role of devoted wife while systematically looting our finances. Vera had provided cover stories and false documentation. Holden had played the patient lover, waiting for his payday. And I'd been the mark, the sucker who signed the checks and asked no questions. I heard movement upstairs, Mira getting ready for the day. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for 6 o'clock with the wedding ceremony tomorrow afternoon. 50 guests were expecting a celebration. The church was booked, the flowers ordered, the photographer confirmed, all of it built on a foundation of lies. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen where I found Nora making breakfast. She looked like she hadn't slept either, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Did you read it all?" she asked. "Every word." She nodded and flipped the eggs in the pan. "What are you going to do?" It was a fair question. 24 hours ago, I'd been a husband and father preparing for his daughter's wedding. Now I was a man whose entire life had been revealed as an elaborate fiction. The old Grant would have confronted Mira immediately, demanded explanations, tried to salvage something from the wreckage. But the old Grant had been naive, trusting, stupid. The new Grant was going to be more strategic. "I'm going to let her hang herself," I said. Nora looked up from the stove. "What do you mean?" "Your mother has spent 24 years perfecting her performance. Let's see how well she does when the audience knows it's all an act." Footsteps on the stairs announced Mira's arrival. She swept into the kitchen wearing her silk robe, blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 45, she was still beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads at the grocery store and made other wives feel inadequate. "Good morning, darlings," she said, kissing Nora's cheek and then mine. Her lips felt like ice against my skin. "Are we ready for the big day?" "As ready as we'll ever be," I said. She poured herself coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through her phone. "I need to call the florist about the centerpieces. And the photographer wants to do some shots before the ceremony. Oh, and Vera's bringing her famous potato salad." Normal conversation. Wedding talk. The same discussions we'd been having for months. Except now I knew that every word was part of the performance. "Where's Cole this morning?" I asked casually. Mira didn't even look up from her phone. "Probably sleeping off his bachelor party. Boys will be boys." Nora and I exchanged a look. We both knew exactly where Cole had been at 2:30 this morning, and it hadn't been at any bachelor party. "I should call him," Nora said. "Make sure he's ready for the rehearsal." "Don't be such a worrier, honey. Cole's a responsible young man. He'll be there." Responsible. That was one way to put it. I excused myself and went back to my office, where I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Sam Morrison, my old colleague from the newspaper who now ran a private investigation business. The second was to my lawyer. Both conversations were brief and to the point. I had evidence of financial fraud and wanted to know my options. I had a cheating wife and wanted to protect my assets. I had a wedding to get through first, but after that, all bets were off. Sam promised to have preliminary paperwork ready by Monday morning. My lawyer advised me to document everything and avoid any confrontation that might be construed as threatening. Both men had worked with me long enough to know I wasn't prone to dramatic gestures or emotional outbursts. They didn't know about the new grant, the one who'd been forged in betrayal and tempered by rage. At noon, Vera arrived to help with wedding preparations. She breezed through our front door like she owned the place, carrying shopping bags and barking orders about table settings and flower arrangements. "Grant, you look tired," she said, giving me the same disapproving look she'd perfected over 20 years. "I hope you're not getting sick. We can't have the father of the bride sniffling through the ceremony." "I'm fine, Vera. Just excited about the big day." She studied my face for a moment, those cold blue eyes searching for something. Vera had always been suspicious of me, always acted like I wasn't good enough for her precious sister. Now I understood why. She'd known from the beginning that this marriage was temporary, that I was just a placeholder until Mira could be with her real love. "Where should I put these?" she asked, holding up the shopping bags. "Kitchen's fine. Mira's in there working on the seating chart." I watched her walk away, noting the expensive purse, the designer clothes, the jewelry that seemed too elaborate for a woman who claimed to live on a teacher's pension. How much of my money had found its way into Vera's pockets over the years? How many family vacations and shopping trips had I unknowingly funded? The afternoon passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Mira fluttered around the house, making lists and checking details, playing the role of devoted mother and wife. She kissed my cheek when she passed, complimented my tie selection, asked my opinion on last-minute menu changes. Oscar-worthy performance. Cole arrived at 4, looking perfectly groomed and appropriately nervous. He shook my hand and called me Sir, the same respectful routine he'd maintained for the past year. If I hadn't seen him with my wife just hours earlier, I might have believed the act. "Nervous?" I asked him. "A little, but excited, you know? Nora's an amazing woman. I'm a lucky guy." "Yes," I said. "You are." He missed the edge in my voice, but Nora caught it. She appeared at Cole's side, slipping her arm through his with practiced ease. "We should head to the church," she said. "The rehearsal starts at 5. The drive to St. Matthew's took 15 minutes. Mira rode in the passenger seat, chattering about flowers and photography angles. In the rearview mirror, I watched Nora and Cole in the back seat. He had his hand on her knee, whispering something that made her smile. She was still playing her part too, the happy bride-to-be who hadn't discovered her fiancé's betrayal. We were all actors in this elaborate play, and none of us were ready to drop our masks. Not yet. The church looked beautiful. Mira and Vera had outdone themselves with the decorations. White roses and baby's breath, elegant ribbons, candles that would cast a romantic glow tomorrow evening. It was everything a young bride could want for her special day. Everything except an honest groom and a faithful mother. Father Mackenzie walked us through the ceremony, explaining where everyone should stand, when to process, how to handle the rings. Cole practiced slipping a simple gold band onto Nora's finger, the same finger that would soon wear her engagement ring again. The ring he'd given her with money that had ultimately come from my accounts. "Do you, Cole, take Nora to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Nora, take Cole to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The lies came so easily. We'd all had so much practice. After the rehearsal, we moved to McKenna's restaurant for dinner. 50 guests filled the private dining room, family, friends, colleagues, people who'd known us for years, who thought they were celebrating young love and new beginnings. I sat at the head table, watching Mira work the room. She was in her element here, playing the gracious hostess, accepting compliments on her dress and the decorations. Several people commented on how lucky I was to have such a wonderful wife. 24 years, said Bob Patterson, my old boss from the insurance company. "You two are an inspiration. True love really does exist?" "We're very blessed," Mira replied, squeezing my hand. Her wedding ring caught the light, the same ring I'd placed on her finger in 1999 when I'd believed in forever. Cole gave a speech about finding his soulmate and promising to cherish Nora always. Vera toasted the happy couple and made jokes about gaining a son. Mira dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, the picture of maternal emotion. I stood up when it was my turn to speak. The room fell quiet. 50 faces turned toward me expectantly. 24 years ago, I began. I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought I understood commitment, loyalty, trust. Marriage teaches you things, though. It shows you who people really are when they think no one's watching. Mira smiled up at me, probably thinking I was building towards some romantic declaration. Tomorrow, we're celebrating new beginnings, but sometimes, before you can start something new, you have to finish what came before. You have to clear away the old foundations before you can build something honest and lasting. A few people nodded, assuming I was talking about Nora leaving home and starting her own family. To Nora and Cole, I said, raising my glass. May your marriage be built on truth. The room erupted in applause. Mira beamed at me, probably proud of her husband's touching words. Cole raised his glass with everyone else, toasting his future with my daughter while planning his next rendezvous with my wife. Only Nora understood what I'd really said. She caught my eye across the table and gave me the slightest nod. Tomorrow would be interesting. I woke up on my daughter's wedding day with perfect clarity. No more confusion, no more hurt feelings, no more wondering what I'd done wrong. Just cold, calculating anger and a plan that had crystallized overnight. Mira was already up, bustling around the bedroom in her slip, debating between two different pairs of earrings. She'd scheduled a hair appointment at 9, followed by a manicure and makeup session. The mother of the bride needed to look perfect for the photographs. "Which ones?" she asked, holding up the earrings. "The diamonds," I said. "They match your personality." She missed the sarcasm entirely, kissing my cheek before disappearing into the bathroom. I heard the shower start and knew I had 20 minutes. I went downstairs to find Nora in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, staring into a cup of coffee like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. "How are you holding up?" I asked. I keep thinking I should feel different, like this should be the happiest day of my life, right? Instead, I feel like I'm watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. I sat down across from her. "It's not your life that's falling apart, sweetheart. It's the lie we've all been living. Sometimes things have to break before they can heal properly." She looked up at me with those dark eyes. Holden Ravell's eyes, I realize now. Not mine, but that didn't make her any less my daughter. Biology was just genetics. Love was choice, and I'd been choosing to love this girl for 22 years. "What's the plan?" she asked. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? We can call it off right now. Tell everyone there's been a family emergency." She shook her head. "No. I want to see their faces when the truth comes out. I want everyone to know what kind of people they really are. It's going to get ugly." "Good. I'm tired of pretty lies." At 10 o'clock, I drove to the church under the pretense of checking on last-minute details. What I really did was meet with Sam Morrison, who handed me a manila envelope containing everything I'd need for the afternoon's festivities. "Bank records, phone records, hotel receipts," Sam said, "plus statements from 3 different witnesses who've seen your wife with both men over the past year. This is enough to bury her in divorce court." "What about the money?" "Oh, that's trickier. She was smart about it. Small amounts over time, always from joint accounts she had legal access to. But the pattern is clear, and the destination accounts are documented. You'll get most of it back, especially if she doesn't want this going public." I tucked the envelope under my arm. She's going public whether she wants to or not. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, with cocktails and dinner to follow. By 3:30, guests were arriving at St. Matthew's, dressed in their finest clothes and carrying wrapped gifts. They smiled and waved as they walked past me into the church, probably thinking I was the proud father having a quiet moment before giving away his daughter. If only they knew. Mira looked stunning in her navy blue dress, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She'd chosen the diamond earrings, and they caught the afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows. 24 years of marriage, and she could still take my breath away. Too bad she was a lying, cheating thief. Cole waited at the altar in his black tuxedo, hands clasped behind his back, the picture of nervous anticipation. His groomsmen flanked him, college friends who probably thought he was the luckiest guy in the world, marrying a beautiful girl and gaining a successful father-in-law in the process. Vera sat in the front pew wearing an elaborate hat and a satisfied smile. She kept glancing around the church, probably cataloging every detail so she could critique the decorations later. Her purse sat beside her, the same expensive leather bag I'd noticed yesterday, probably purchased with money that had originated in my accounts. The music started, and the bridesmaids began their procession down the aisle. Nora's college friends, all young and hopeful, walking slowly toward an altar where promises would be made and immediately broken. Then came Nora herself, radiant in white silk and lace, carrying a bouquet of white roses. She'd insisted on walking alone, no father to give her away, no symbolic transfer of ownership from one man to another. At the time, I'd thought it was a feminist statement. Now I understood the real reason. She wasn't my daughter to give away. The ceremony began with Father Mackenzie's traditional words about love and commitment, about the sacred bond between husband and wife. I listened from the front pew, thinking about sacred bonds and how easily they could be shattered by selfishness and greed. Do you, Cole, take Nora to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live? Cole's voice rang out clear and strong. I do, forsaking all others. The words would have been funny if they weren't so pathetic. Do you, Nora, take Cole to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live? Nora looked directly at me before answering. I do. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She was saying the words, but she didn't mean them. This marriage was already over before it began. Father Mackenzie pronounced them husband and wife. Cole kissed his bride while the congregation applauded. Rice was thrown, photographs were taken, congratulations were offered. Everyone played their parts perfectly. The reception was held in the church's fellowship hall, decorated with the same white roses and baby's breath from the ceremony. A string quartet played soft classical music, while guests sipped champagne and sampled hors d'oeuvres. It was elegant, tasteful, expensive, everything Mira had wanted for her daughter's wedding. I waited until after dinner, when the champagne had loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions, the perfect time for revelations. I stood up at the head table and tapped my champagne flute with a knife. The room gradually fell silent, 50 faces turning toward me expectantly. Time for the father of the bride's toast. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, thank you all for being here today to celebrate this joyous occasion. Marriage is a sacred institution, built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. It requires two people to commit themselves completely to each other, forsaking all others. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mira smiled up at me, her eyes bright with champagne and maternal pride. Unfortunately, I continued, not everyone understands what those commitments mean. The room grew quieter. Something in my tone had shifted, and people were starting to sense it. I reached into my jacket and pulled out Sam's manila envelope. Some of you may be wondering why I'm holding these documents at my daughter's wedding reception. The answer is simple, because this seemed like the perfect time to share some interesting discoveries I've made about the people closest to me. Mira's smile faltered. Vera sat up straighter in her chair. Cole looked confused, probably wondering if this was some kind of surprise he should have been warned about. For instance, I said, opening the envelope, I learned that my wife of 24 years has been having an affair with a man named Holden Ravell since before our daughter was born. In fact, Holden is Nora's biological father. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone dropped a champagne flute, and it shattered on the floor with a sound like breaking crystal. Mira had gone completely white, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I also learned, I continued, my voice steady and calm, that over the past 19 years, my wife has systematically stolen over $300,000 from our joint accounts to support her lover's failing business. More gasps. People were looking back and forth between me and Mira, trying to process what they were hearing. This wasn't the touching father of the bride speech they'd expected. And perhaps most interestingly, I said, pulling out a hotel receipt, I discovered that my daughter's new husband has been sleeping with my wife for the past 8 months. In fact, they were together just 2 nights ago, in our garden shed, while the rest of us slept peacefully in our beds. The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as people stood up, voices rising in shock and disbelief. Someone screamed, I think it was Mira's mother. Cole had gone pale as his white dress shirt, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But Nora just sat there, calm as still water, watching the chaos unfold around her. These documents, I said, raising my voice over the commotion, contain bank records, hotel receipts, email correspondence, and witness statements. Everything is documented, verified, and legally admissible. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday morning, along with charges of financial fraud. Mira finally found her voice. Grant, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me for 24 years. How you convinced me I was infertile when the problem was that you were already pregnant with another man's child. How you and your sister forged medical documents and coached my daughter to never ask questions about her parentage. Vera stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. This is ridiculous. Grant's having some kind of breakdown. Sit down, Vera, I said quietly. Unless you'd like me to discuss your role in all this. The falsified medical records, the fake alibis, the money you've received over the years for your cooperation. She sat down. I turned to Cole, who was still staring at me in shock. Did you really think no one would notice? Did you think you could marry my daughter and continue sleeping with my wife without consequences?" I can explain," he stammered. "No need. I have photographs." I didn't actually, but he didn't know that. The bluff worked. His face crumpled, and he buried his head in his hands. The room had gone completely silent now. 50 people sat frozen in their chairs, watching this family destroy itself in real time. It was better than anything they could have seen on television. "The marriage is annulled, effective immediately," I announced. "Cole, you have 24 hours to remove your belongings from any property I own. Mira, you have 48 hours. Vera, you're no longer welcome in my home." I set the manila envelope on the table and walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted again. Voices shouting, chairs overturning, the sound of someone crying. But I didn't look back. Nora caught up with me in the parking lot, still wearing her wedding dress but carrying her shoes in one hand. "That was amazing," she said, slightly out of breath. "That was necessary." We stood there for a moment, father and daughter, watching wedding guests stream out of the fellowship hall in confused clusters. Some were already pulling out their phones, probably calling friends and family to share the gossip. By tomorrow morning, everyone in town would know the truth about the Solen family. "What happens now?" Nora asked. "Now we go home and figure out what's left. Are you okay? Really okay?" I looked at this young woman who'd been brave enough to uncover the truth and strong enough to help me face it. She wasn't my biological daughter, but she was mine in every way that mattered. "I'm better than I've been in 24 years, I said. "For the first time in my adult life, I know exactly where I stand." We drove home in comfortable silence, leaving behind the wreckage of a marriage built on lies and a wedding that had become a reckoning. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, difficult conversations, and financial negotiations. But tonight, for the first time in decades, I would sleep peacefully. The truth, as ugly as it was, had finally set me free. Behind us, the church bells were ringing, just as they always did at the end of a wedding ceremony. But this time, they sounded less like celebration and more like a funeral dirge for the life I'd thought I was living. And that was perfectly fine with me. The house felt different when we got home. Larger somehow, like a space that had been holding its breath for years, had finally exhaled. Nora disappeared upstairs to change out of her wedding dress while I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, the same one where I'd read bedtime stories and helped with homework and pretended to be a real father to a child who wasn't mine. Except she was mine. Biology didn't define family. Commitment did. And I had chosen Nora every single day for 22 years. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we left the church. Text messages, voicemails, missed calls from numbers I recognized and some I didn't. The story was spreading through town like wildfire, and everyone wanted details, explanations, confirmation of what they'd witnessed. I turned the phone off and focused on my bourbon. Nora came back downstairs wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger without the wedding makeup, more like the little girl who used to curl up on my lap during thunderstorms. "The phone's been ringing upstairs too," she said, settling onto the couch. "I unplugged it." "Good thinking." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the old house settle around us. Outside, I could see neighbors walking past more slowly than usual, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of drama through our windows. Small town life. Everyone's business was everyone's entertainment. "Do you think they'll try to come back tonight?" Nora asked. "Mira might. She'll want to explain, to try to salvage something from the wreckage. Vera will probably convince her to wait until tomorrow, let things cool down." "And Cole?" I thought about my new son-in-law, who'd looked like he wanted to crawl under the reception table and disappear. Cole's a coward. He'll run back to his apartment and start planning his exit strategy, probably already composing his resignation letter. Cole worked at a local accounting firm, the kind of small business where reputation mattered more than talent. After today's revelations, his career in this town was finished. He'd have to start over somewhere else, assuming he could find someone willing to hire a man who'd been publicly exposed as an adulterer at his own wedding. "I keep thinking I should feel worse about this," Nora said. "Like I just destroyed my own wedding. I should be devastated." "Are you?" She considered the question seriously. "No, I feel relieved. Like I've been holding up a house of cards for months, and now I can finally let it fall down." That's exactly what it was. A house of cards. My phone started buzzing again, even though I'd turned it off. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw that it had somehow turned itself back on. The caller ID showed Sam Morrison's number. "Grant? Jesus Christ, what happened? I've had 6 people call me in the past hour asking if what they heard about the Solen wedding was true." "It's true." "You actually stood up at the reception and exposed everything? In front of 50 people?" Seemed like the right moment. Sam laughed, a sound somewhere between admiration and disbelief. You've got stones, I'll give you that. How are you holding up? Better than expected. What's the legal situation? Well, the good news is you've got grounds for divorce that no judge in the state would question. The financial fraud case is solid, too. I've already been in touch with the district attorney's office. They're interested. And the bad news? There's going to be fallout. Mira's going to fight this, probably claim emotional distress or mental instability on your part. She might try to paint you as the villain who destroyed an innocent young couple's wedding day. I looked at Nora, who was listening to my side of the conversation with interest. Let her try. I've got documentation going back 24 years. Speaking of documentation, you might want to secure your house tonight. Change the locks, maybe install a security camera. People do crazy things when they're backed into corners. After I hung up, Nora and I spent an hour going through the house, making sure all the windows were locked and the security system was armed. It felt paranoid, but Sam was right. Desperate people were unpredictable. At 10 o'clock, we saw headlights in the driveway. Mira's BMW pulled up to the front of the house, and I watched through the living room window as she sat behind the wheel for several minutes, probably gathering courage or rehearsing her speech. She'd changed out of her mother-of-the-bride dress into jeans and a sweater, and even from a distance, I could see that she'd been crying. Finally, she got out of the car and walked to the front door. Instead of using her key, she knocked, a small acknowledgement that this wasn't her home anymore. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Grant, please. We need to talk. I think we've said everything that needs saying. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know, our friends, our neighbors, your colleagues. How could you do that? I almost laughed. How could I do that? Mira, you've been stealing my money and sleeping with other men for over 2 decades. You convinced me I was infertile and then passed off your lover's child as mine, and you're asking how I could embarrass you. Nora is your daughter. Biology doesn't change that. You're right. It doesn't, which is why she's staying here with me while you find somewhere else to live. Mira looked past me into the house, probably hoping to see Nora. Where is she? I need to talk to her, to explain. There's nothing to explain. She knows everything. She's the one who uncovered most of it. That's impossible. Nora's been investigating you for months. She followed Cole to the hotel, saw you together, started digging deeper. She found the financial records, the emails, the medical documents. She handed me the evidence 2 days ago. Mira's face crumpled. She set this up? Her own wedding? She realized she couldn't marry a man who was sleeping with her mother. Can you blame her? This is insane. Grant, I love you. I've always loved you. Yes, I made mistakes, but... Mistakes. 24 years of systematic deception isn't a mistake, Mira. It's a lifestyle choice. She tried a different approach, stepping closer and lowering her voice to the intimate tone she'd used during our courtship. We can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. The only thing that would make this right is a time machine, and since those don't exist, we're getting divorced. You can't just throw away 24 years of marriage. I'm not throwing it away. I'm acknowledging that it never existed in the first place. She started crying then, real tears that might have moved me a week ago. Now they just seemed like another performance, another manipulation tactic from a woman who'd built her entire adult life on lies. Where am I supposed to go? This is my home. You should have thought about that before you decided to turn it into a way station for your affairs. I never brought anyone here, never. Except Cole, in our shed, 2 nights ago. Her face went white. How did you? I saw you, both of you. So did Nora. She leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking older than her 45 years. Grant, please. I know I hurt you, but destroying my life isn't going to fix anything. I'm not destroying your life. I'm just stopping you from destroying mine. Behind me, I heard Nora's footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the hallway, still wearing her jeans and sweatshirt, looking like any normal 22-year-old, except for the steel in her eyes. Mom. Nora, honey, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. I was going to tell you after the wedding, I swear. Tell me what? That you've been lying to me my entire life? That the man I thought was my father is actually just the guy whose money you've been stealing to support your real family? That's not how it was. That's exactly how it was. Nora stepped up beside me, presenting a united front. I've seen the emails, Mom, the bank records, the hotel receipts. I know about Holden, about Vera's part in covering it all up, about Cole. Cole was a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake that I regret every day. You regret getting caught. Mira looked between us, probably realizing for the first time that she'd lost both of us, that whatever sympathy or forgiveness she might have counted on was gone. "I'll get my things tomorrow," she said finally. "You have 48 hours," I replied. "After that, the locks get changed." She nodded and walked back to her car, moving like a woman who'd aged 20 years in the past 6 hours. As she drove away, I realized I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret, no lingering affection for the woman I'd thought I'd married, just relief that the performance was finally over. Nora and I watched the BMW's taillights disappear down our street. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, difficult conversations with friends and family, the messy business of untangling 2.5 decades of shared life. But tonight, for the first time in years, our house felt like home. "Are you okay?" I asked Nora. She considered the question, the same way she'd considered everything else over the past few days. Seriously, thoughtfully, with a maturity that belied her 22 years. "I think so. It's weird, you know. I thought this would feel like losing a mother. Instead, it feels like finding out I never really had one." We went back inside and locked the door behind us. Tomorrow would be complicated, but tonight was simple. Father and daughter, sitting in a quiet house, finally able to breathe freely after years of suffocating on other people's lies. It wasn't the ending any of us had planned, but it was honest. And after 24 years of deception,